Hello, my wonderful, beautiful friends. Welcome back to r/EntitledPeople, where you'll hear stories about people who truly believe that they can do what they want and that rules do not apply to them. Guys, in this episode, you're going to hear 3 super entitled stories. The first story, a Karen calls the cops on OP because of underwear hang drying on a clothesline. The second story, it's ridiculous. The second story is a little longer, and OP gets attacked by Karen's husband on a plane after Karen steals OP's seat. And we'll finish off with a family who thinks they own an entire beach. My friends, sit back, relax, and get ready to shake your head at how entitled people can be. Oh, and do hit that subscribe button for future stories. So, this takes place in my hometown. A house had been built right next to ours over the course of the past year and a half, and a small family moved into it. We never met the family, as we're usually not the ones to go out of our way to meet people, so it comes as a huge surprise when this happened. So we have a backyard, which is private. It's surrounded by a fence with a locking gate. Karen's house had a deck that overlooked our backyard. Midwinter, our dryer decided to die, and we had to take all of our clothes to the closest laundromat to dry at least once a week. Once spring rolled around, I decided to put a clothesline in our backyard to help save money. A few weeks went by, and at least once a week, I would be out there hanging loads of laundry to dry. On one such occasion, our neighbor, the entitled mother, was on her deck talking on her phone. I paid her no mind and just hung my clothes to dry. As I headed back inside, I heard the dreaded banshee screech that was the entitled mother. She said, "Hey, boy." Now, I'm a woman, but I have my hair cut short with most of it buzzed, so I can see why she assumed I was a boy. I looked over, mostly because of the noise she made, and not because I thought she was talking to me. But unfortunately, she was, and she says, "You can't hang those out here. You can't just hang your filthy underwear out here where I have to look at them. What if my kids see? Are you some kind of sicko?" I told her, "Lady, it's my backyard. If I want to hang my laundry to dry in my backyard, I can." And with that, I flipped her the universal sign to go pleasure herself and went inside. About a half hour later, I hear a knock on my door, and when I answer it, there's a police officer standing at my door. He says, "Good afternoon, ma'am. We received a call about a person in this residence trying to flash minors. Would you happen to know anything about this?" I replied, "Seriously? That lady was just screaming at me for hanging my underwear on my clothesline. I assure you nothing else is happening." The officer asked if he could take a look, and I said, "Of course." I showed the officer my clothesline, and we could clearly see the mother glaring at us with a smug look on her face from her deck. The officer thanked me, went to speak to the mother, and that was that. What a great first impression that OP's neighbor made. Let's just complain about clothes hang drying outside, and then call the police to lie about OP to get her in trouble. What happened to being nice and bringing over a pie? Guys, so the next story I got for you is a long one, but it's also a really satisfying one, where OP gets a little mini revenge on a Karen and her husband. Senior year of high school, I was taking a plane to visit my grandma. The flight went from Baltimore to Pittsburgh, Pittsburgh to Vegas, then Vegas to Boise. The flight from Baltimore was almost empty, and I was Southwest, so I could choose my own seat, and I was on the same plane until Vegas. I selected the last row of the plane by the window, put my earbuds in, and took a nap till Pittsburgh. When the plane landed, I went to the bathroom while people were getting onto the plane. To save my spot, I left my backpack in my seat and put my jacket on the seat, and I left. When I got back, I noticed that this pregnant lady, Karen, was sitting in my seat, and her husband was sitting in the aisle seat. They had thrown my jacket on the ground in the aisle, with my backpack underneath, with a laptop in it. Kind of annoyed, I pointed out that I was previously sitting in the window seat and wanted to know if I could have my seat back. Karen says, "Can't you see that I'm pregnant and I need this seat?" She said that quite aggressively. I then looked at the husband and asked if he could please scoot over to sit next to his wife, and this guy looked me in the eyes and said, "Sorry, but we're allowed to choose our own seats, and I choose the aisle seat." Being a high school senior, I wasn't that big of a guy, but I was still not happy to be sitting in the center seat. Realizing that this was a losing argument, and I wasn't going to get any leverage over this lady, I decided to grit my teeth and bear it. I collect my stuff and move into the middle seat. The second I sat down, the lady said, "You can't have your backpack in your seat. You're going to have to find a place to put it." I told her I'm just going to put it under my seat. And then she responds, "Where am I going to put my feet then?" I don't know, not under my seat. And then I muttered, "Ugh, idiot." Suddenly, I feel someone grab at my collar. The husband pulled me inches from his face and said, "Don't use that language to my wife or the baby. Now say you're sorry." I was shocked. Not only was this guy grabbing me in public, but at the time I was only 17 and still considered a minor. But not wanting to make a big deal out of this, I gave the most half-assed, "I'm sorry," to the woman and put my earbuds in as the flight was getting ready to take off. While taxiing, the lady kept trying to get my attention by yelling in my ear and snapping her fingers inches from my face before she finally pulled my earbuds out. She said, "You need to turn your electronics off during takeoff." In a rage, she spams the flight attendant button. The flight attendant runs over and asks what's wrong, expecting an emergency. And she says, "He won't turn off his electronics before flight. He doesn't care about our lives." Realizing everybody's staring at us when the flight attendant asked me to turn it off, I oblige. After I turn it off, she starts to lecture me about how she was right and I was wrong, rubbing how the flight attendant proved her right. So the flight is in the air, and when the intercom tells me we can use electronics, I put my earbuds in and crank it. And about 5 minutes into the flight, I feel aggravated tapping on my shoulder. I turn and look at the woman, and she says, "You need to turn that down. It's bad for my baby." While I was listening to music louder than normal, it still wasn't to the point that an unborn baby would be able to hear it and be able to understand. Shocked, I responded with, "No." But the second she reached for the flight attendant button, I said that I would. I did that trick where you turn your volume down 2 times and then up once, so it looks like you turned it down 3 times. And I asked, "Better?" And she responded, "More." So I went down 1 more. Before I could put my earbuds back in, she said, "It's proper etiquette to talk to the people you're sitting next to." I just ignore her. So I sit back and try to close my eyes, and amazingly, this worked. I fall asleep for about an hour. It's a 5-hour flight. When I woke up, this woman had her foot on my backpack with my laptop in it. So I adjust my foot, so it's uncomfortable for her to continue to keep her feet the way they were. She immediately stood up, and I thought she was going to yell given her ability to overreact. But it turns out that she was just getting up to use the bathroom. She gets past me and her husband when a brilliant idea pops into my head. The second she steps into the bathroom, I get ready to get up and move my stuff over to the window seat. And as I grab my backpack and shift my momentum over, I feel a hand grab me. I did not take into account the husband, and he says, "You are not taking my wife's seat." I told him, "Sir, I have to warn you that you're grabbing a minor, and if I feel like it at any second, I could cry that you're attacking me." I respond as he lets go, and I move over to the seat I had before. When she gets back, she's furious, demanding that I move seats now to the point where the flight attendant comes over to see what's going on. And this time, she sides with me. The woman sits in the middle seat, pissed as hell. Thankfully, I moved seats, because she was up and down in her seat having to go to the bathroom every 15 minutes. And that was pretty much the rest of the flight, except how she intercepted my bag of pretzels when the drink cart came. I responded by closing the shade to the window as we started to land at the Las Vegas airport. So once off the plane, I went to Burger King to get drink and some food. Then I got to my next gate and find the last seat. I scarf down my fries and burger and walk across the hall, literally 10 feet away from my seat, to throw away my garbage. And when I turn back to go to my seat, I see the same lady now sitting in my seat that I had my bag in, and she moved it to the floor in front of her. She then shot me the smug grin, thinking she had won. Somewhat defeated by losing 2 seats to the lady, losing sleep, and my patience, I figured it was time for action. I went over to her to gather my things, and as I got to her, I looked her dead in the eyes. I raised my right hand out with my finger spread, and I hovered it right over her stomach. I looked down at my hand and then back to her eyes, and I said, "I just cursed your baby." I turn around 180 to walk across the hall and sit down on the floor staring at her intensely. Now, I don't believe in curses, nor do I think I have the ability to place a curse, but this lady believed it. Her face was left expressionless, and she just started weeping to herself as I sat and watched. When her husband came to see what was wrong, and she told him, he instantly stormed over to me and knocked the drink out of my hand, grabbed me by the collar, and got right in my face and said, "Listen here, you little punk." And that was all he got out before security guards grabbed the man and detained him. One guard asked me why this guy was angry, and I said that his wife had taken my seat, and I made a comment under my breath and he got upset with me. The officer asked for my name and identification and saw that I was a minor, and he asked if I wanted to press charges, and I told him yes, but I also didn't want to miss my flight. So he understood and he let me go, then informed the Southwest airline attendant to please keep track of me just in case we need more information. This meant that I got to get on early and chose the first seat I could, the aisle seat, to see if this lady would get on the plane. But she never got on the plane, and it takes off. Halfway through the flight attendant asked me if I put a curse on the baby, and I responded with, "I don't know magic." 20 minutes later, the flight attendant told me that they missed their flight and would have to buy a new ticket to their final destination with another airline. So, with 5 words, I cost this horrible woman and her husband around $500. I absolutely love this story. To think that the entitled woman almost got away with it until OP's incredible mind and quick thinking cursed her unborn baby. What in the world? I am totally going to use that one day. I'm just going to start cursing Karens whenever they piss me off. Heading on to our last story, an entitled family thinks they own an entire beach, my friends, which is absolutely ridiculous. Because I own beaches. I own them all. So, quick backstory. My family and family friends own beach houses in a little bay that eventually leads out to the ocean. There's several small piers within the boardwalk area where families can swim and jump off the piers. They have netting surrounding the pier to indicate how far families can swim. Beyond the netting, that's where boats, kayaks, etc. run. So unfortunately on these piers, there have been some entitled people believing that they own some of the piers because their beach house is right behind it. I will admit, our family has had our beach house for over a century, passed down through several generations. Even though we have to walk down the street to get to this pier, I think if anybody deserves this pier, it should be us. Anyway, on to the story. This happened to my neighbor who eventually told my family friend what happened. After swimming hours are over at the pier, families like to go there to catch crabs. Because of the whole social distancing thing, neighbor and neighbor's daughter went to try to find a good spot away from other families so they could crab. They actually got a really good spot at the end of the pier, away from everybody else, and they set up their things there. They were only planning on catching a few crabs and then heading out. It was only a few minutes into crabbing when the 15 to 16-year-old kid comes marching right over to my neighbor and neighbor's daughter and said, "Hey, you're in my spot." My neighbor looked around, trying to find anything to show that the kid's spot was taken. Nets, cages, buckets, etc., and there wasn't any. They were the only ones there. Everybody else was on the other side of the pier. And neighbor said, "I'm sorry, but there's nothing here to show you that this is your spot." And he said, "You need to leave. Now. That's my spot." My neighbor told the kid that this is public property and nothing here is yours. We're only going to catch a few crabs and then leave. Just please be patient. So the kid continued to whine for a couple of minutes before finally leaving. My neighbor couldn't believe how immature this kid was acting, and her daughter was only 10 and acting even more mature than he was. Not even a few minutes later, the kid comes back, and who does he come with? The entitled mother, who was a full-on Karen. She said, "Excuse me, I heard you two made fun of my son and won't let him have his spot back." My neighbor told her that we never insulted him and there's nothing here to show you that this is his spot. We're only here to catch a few crabs and then we'll head out. She said, "No, you need to leave his spot now." My neighbor told the lady that we're not going anywhere, and she, pointing to a house, said, "You see that? That's our house right there. My son has claimed the spot on the pier as his own. You must obey or I will tell the authorities." My neighbor told her again that there's nothing marked on this pier that states that this spot is your son's. This pier and the entire beach and boardwalk is public property. I myself can call the authorities on you for disturbing us. So it looked like my neighbor had finally put the entitled mother and her kid in a corner. Neighbor's daughter, completely oblivious to the argument and focusing on crabbing, pulls out a small crab from her net and shows it to my neighbor. Before they could say anything though, the entitled mother quickly butts in and says, "Give us that crab you just caught. It'll make up for all the trouble you caused." My neighbor told her that it's too small to be kept. And the mother says, "Who told you that? It's an actual law here." And she responds, "There's nothing here to prove that." My neighbor then points to a sign that was on a pole directly behind them, explaining the rules of catching crabs. My neighbor then told her, if you own this pier like you claim you do, you would have known that. The mother did not say anything, but she tried to snatch the small crab out of my neighbor's daughter's net. Thankfully, before the entitled mother got to her, the small crab let go and plopped back into the water. The mother lets out an ungodly howl at the sight, as if she had just watched her precious kid get attacked by a shark or something. Finally, she grabbed her kid and stormed away from them. Neighbor and neighbor's daughter did not stay too long after that, and they didn't catch any crabs. They both just wanted to get the hell out of there after that. Entitlement logic at its finest. Look at our house. It's right there. We live right there, so we own the whole pier and boardwalk. What? And that wraps up another episode of r/EntitledPeople. Guys, if you enjoyed the stories today, do hit that subscribe button. If you guys missed the last episode, a lady's son breaks his arm stealing OP's purse, and OP gets sued. What? Check it out if you haven't, and I'll see you guys in the next one. I love you.